Hey guys, if you like what you're seeing, be sure to click below to subscribe and share.
It's not just about the photograph, it's the outdoor experience. Keep in mind everything that you need to know about photography. F-stop, shutter speed, lens selection. Nice photo. I've got beautiful light now. Oh my God. I'm your host, Doug Gardner, and your wild photo adventure starts now. Welcome to the Lowcountry of South Carolina. What a magnificent place it is. You know, as a child, I have fond memories of growing up in these tidal marshes and just getting out every day and exploring it for myself. This week, join nature photographer Horan and me as we get out and explore these tidal marshes and barrier islands in search of magnificent seascapes. I'm your host, Doug Gardner, and your wild photo adventure starts now. We don't have those pretty royal blue skies or the big white puffy clouds, and we don't have much of a storm. Really, all we have is kind of a thin veil of white clouds just kind of covering the whole sky. But the real shot here is not the sky, it's this beautiful little tidal creek that weaves through the marsh, and it's a lush green marsh. I walked down to the edge of the creek and shot a couple shots, but it really didn't do it for me. Just by elevating yourself a few feet, I'm about 10 feet off the ground on Eric's ladder, and it's allowing me to look down into this tidal creek, and now I can see every little bend of this creek. The most important part of the shot is the foreground, which is the marsh and the creek. I want to show a little bit of sky, a little bit of that horizon line, just as a reference point. But it's not very attractive, so I'm not going to include a whole lot. All right, and I'm shooting at an aperture of f13. And a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second. And so let's see what happens. All right, that's looking pretty good. It's early morning, however, so we have a lot of orangey light, yellowish light coming in, and it's really kind of super saturating the color. And it's a little too yellow for me, so I'm gonna go into my Kelvin scale and dial down the Kelvin to about, I'm at 5400, which is daylight setting now. I'm gonna go down to 40, let's try 4700 and see if that kind of cools it down a little bit. Okay, that's much better. Now you don't want to cool it down too much. The whole thing here is you want to benefit from the nice warm tones of the sun, so we don't want to take that effect away. But one thing with digital photography especially, a lot of times early morning, late afternoon, the sun has such an orangish yellow tint to it, sometimes it's too much. So you need to back that effect down a little bit. And you know, if you can get that color of the green and the blue of the water to register, man, this could be really spectacular. When you're doing landscape photography, one of the key things you want to do when you're composing the shot is to look for geometric elements that add depth to the scene. In this particular situation, this is a classic example of an S-curve. Now, other things that you want to look for in a scene is C-curves or converging lines or diagonal lines. All of these elements draw the viewer's eye in and through your photograph. Also, look your scenarios over for potential vertical shots too. Now, because I'm going vertical, I need to tilt the camera down a little bit more, so I'm including a little more of this marsh grass, because again, I don't have a very interesting sky, so I want to use as little of that as possible. Oh yeah, that's very nice. All right, I tell you what, the coastal area of South Carolina is an amazing place, and you know, we've got a lot of area to cover, so let's get out of here and see what else we can find. Another beautiful seascape out here on the barrier islands of South Carolina. What we've got here is a dune field just covered with sea oats. First and foremost, when you're working around sea oats, be careful that you're not trampling them down. These plants are very important to how the islands move with erosion and storm surges and that kind of thing. It protects and keeps the sand in one place. So these are very, very crucial plants to this environment, so be careful where you stand. Now what we've got here is I want something in the foreground, so I've positioned my camera right here so I have sea oats close to my foreground, and then it's open off to the right hand side here. So what this will do is these sea oats close to the camera will draw the viewer's eye through the picture. Now we've got several things going on here. Number one, the cloud is not very dramatic at all. We actually have just kind of a plain white sky right over the horizon, over the Atlantic here. We've got beautiful blue water, however, we don't like that white sky, so we want to minimize that. If it doesn't add to the picture, you want to take it out and compose your picture differently so that all the elements are equally strong in there. So I'm going to tilt the camera down a little bit and minimize the amount of sky that I see in the shot. Now on the other side of that, if this was a dramatic storm cloud above, we would want to do the opposite. I may want to lower the camera down to the ground, get a little bit closer to these sea oats, and let the majority of my frame, like 2/3 of my frame, be the dramatic sky and the clouds towering over me. So, you know, you got to look at the situation and what the sky is doing and work off of that. Now, the way I'm exposing for this is it's a landscape, so you want as much depth of field as possible. So with this particular lens, I know that it's sharpest at around f11, and so I'm trying to use the f-stop of a f11. That's going to give everything from these sea oats right in front of me to infinity in sharp focus. Now normally with a landscape, shutter speed is not such of a big issue. However, if we're out on the beach, we got the wind blowing, which I'm sure you can hear in the mic, and you see these sea oats are just dancing around in the foreground. So we got to have some shutter speed, some high shutter speed to stop that movement. We don't want that blurred. Unless in your photograph you're trying to imply movement, then in that case you want a slow shutter speed so you are intentionally blurring these sea oats blowing around. But I don't. I want them sharp and perfectly still. All right, well, just that quick, we lost our light. We got clouds moving in, and you know, that's the way it is in the summertime. It's typical evening thunderstorm type weather, and you have to just work between that. And you got to keep in mind that photography is all about light. That is the most important thing next to subject matter. And with landscapes, you know, your landscape can change dramatically just by letting the light come in and out, in and out. So what I'm waiting for right now is that cloud to move out the way, and we get some raking light, low angle raking light, which creates shadows between these dunes, and the dunes it'll give texture to the scene. Another thing that I'm doing in this particular shot is I'm toning down that unattractive white sky by putting a graduated neutral density filter in front of it. Now this is a 2-stop filter, and what it's doing is just darkening down the top of the horizon line over the ocean, and it's leaving the foreground, which is the sea oats and the sand dunes here, completely unaffected. It's just clear on the bottom. And that way I can kind of darken down the sky, get a little bit more color into it. It's just a waiting game at this point, but it looks like we've got a break coming here in just a few minutes. All right, we got our light back. Let's see what we got here. Oh yeah, very nice. We got some nice shadows down in this bottom and the sand dunes here. This is really nice. And these type of situations, you just want to play it out. Take a few shots, wait on the light, see if it gets better. A lot of times when you walk up to a situation, you shoot a picture and you say, wow, that's really nice. You wait 10 minutes and it can change dramatically. So my settings for this particular shot is 1/500th of a second at aperture of f11, and my ISO is 800. All right, well, Eric has found another situation right over on the other side of the beach here. Let's go check it out and see what he's got going on.
There's a lot of important things to think about doing landscape photography, but one of the first things and the most important things is establishing your camera angle. Where you put the camera is going to help you determine the lighting and the composition of the shot. Here, when we're working in all natural light, the camera position really does determine what your lighting is going to be and what your composition is going to be. So you spend a lot of time building a shot. Before we ever release the shutter, we're going to make sure that we like where we set the camera. I'm not far up on a ladder, but just a little bit of elevation out here helps you make a palette kind of out of the foreground. So we want more definition in the foreground. You're going to get the camera up a little bit higher. So I'm looking down in the foreground and I'm building the shot from here, the first half of the frame. If you can visualize this, if you've got the camera down lower, I'm shooting through all the foreground, but I'm not seeing the ground. So you're kind of squashing the lower half of the frame. So it gives you whole nother perspective. You know, we talk about with bird photography or with pet photography, you want to get down at the animal's level. Well, this is kind of the opposite thinking of that. You know, we want to, with a landscape, we really want to see the details at all distances in the shot, so that there's something of interest when the viewer is looking at the frame. There's something of interest all the way out to the horizon, all the way out to the end. When you're doing editorial, you're doing commercial photography, you've got to do something to separate yourself from the crowd, the other photographers that are trying to get work that you're trying to get. And you do have to do something different, or the editors are going to go to somebody else. So I always try and keep a fresh approach to whatever I'm trying to do. But using the ladder is a good tool a lot of times. You know, we're really dependent on the sun here and we're losing it right now. So I'm just going to wrap this up, and I know Doug's over there working, so we'll scoop him up and go on home and hopefully have time to get some supper and get up early in the morning. We're going out to another area over here, so can't wait.
Wow, this is absolutely fantastic. What an amazing place to photograph. These boneyards offer so many opportunities to photograph. It's just absolutely unbelievable. And you know, you have to kind of make order out of chaos here. And as you look down the beach, it is just a tangled mess. But you know, that tells a story too. And for a documentary type shot, it would be great to maybe get an aerial shot, or as Eric talked about earlier, using a ladder to get up a higher perspective and look down the beach and just see all these skeleton trees laying out on the beach. Wow, this is absolutely fantastic. The story here is the fact that this was wooded maritime forest just a few years ago, and the forest up to 8 years ago was out there maybe 300 yards. So as you can see, there's nothing left, and the ocean has just eroded away the sand, undermining the roots of these trees, which leaves these beautiful skeleton trees out here.
I've just chosen this piece of fallen, actually it's live oak tree, because I love the twists on the live oak. And we're here, and I've kind of got a little bit of a side light to add some sculpting with the shadows, and it's in the surf. Because of that, I've chosen to use 8 stops of neutral density and a polarizer to kind of cut the glare, because I'm shooting side light here to kind of add a little sculpting and character to the shot with shadowing, and so I'm getting some glare that I may want to cut. That polarizer will help cut down that glare on those highlights. The water, the surf is receding, so as the surf goes out, it's leaving a nice slick around the driftwood. So I'm getting not only nice blur in the water, but a nice reflective surface when the water goes out.
I've chosen one tree that's out here in the water for 2 reasons. Number one, to kind of isolate it and to kind of give it that lonesome feeling. And I'm able to blur the movement of the water by slowing down my shutter speed. By using an 8-stop neutral density filter, I'm actually fooling the camera's meter into thinking there's a lot less light than there really is. So I'm having to use a much slower shutter speed to obtain the same amount of light entering the camera. And so over a second's time, the water is moving in and out, and it's giving me that nice blur effect. Now, to expose for the shot, all I'm doing, we've got a little bit of thin veil of cloud cover over the sun, but it's still pretty bright. It's enough though that I'm getting a little bit of gray sheen on the water. So I'm metering the gray water here, and my exposure is dead on the money. So what I'm doing is I'm actually adjusting my exposure based on my neutral tones being the gray, the tree, the blue in the sky. And I'm controlling my highlights by using a circular polarizer, and a circular polarizer is what helps us knock off glare and sheen. That's helping knock down some of the specular highlights on the water. The other thing I'm doing is I'm using these drop-in graduated neutral density filters. Now, yeah, I've got a lot going on the front of this camera. I've got 8 stops solid neutral density filter, which cuts down the overall light. Then I've got a circular polarizer, which takes another 2 stops of light, but it controls the sheen and the glare. And then I'm using graduated NDs, and I'm dropping these down to drop down the exposure on the sky, and I'm able to increase the shadow area exposure. So this is coming out really good. Normally you would be out of here by now because the great light is gone, but Eric and I are going to show you how to get some spectacular marsh scenes with midday sun. Eric, this looks like a good area right in here.
Yeah, you know, that's one of the few marsh islands that you can get right up next in the creek. So that would be good.
All right, well, let's do it. I think we got high enough tide to get in that creek, but we got to make sure we got enough water to get back out. I don't want to be stuck here for 8 hours.
Really?
Let's do it. You know, we've always been taught that the best time to be out photographing is early morning and late afternoon in that golden light. But you know, rules are made to be broken. And if you understand how light reacts with your subject and the effects that it gives you, you can shoot beautiful images all day long depending on the conditions. Here it is shortly after noon, the sun is high, and we have a beautiful landscape right here in front of us. Eric and I aren't very far apart, only about 20 yards. And we're getting drastically different shots out of the exact same scene. And he's chosen a high perspective off of the ladder, about 12 feet off the ground, and I've chosen a very low angle. So I'm right in there, nice and intimate shot with the marsh grass. I'm picking up a lot of detail in the marsh grass, And that tells a whole nother story. And like I said, it's the same exact scene and we're getting drastically different images. So, you know, looking at a scene from many different perspectives can give you a whole array of different photographs. I love how lush and green this marsh is, and the creek coming in from the right-hand side is nice and blue, and then we got, of course, that great sky out there. What a magnificent situation. One of the questions I get a lot is, how do I focus for a landscape? Well, it's really pretty easy. All you need to do is compose the shot the way you want it, and then visually divide the frame into thirds and find a spot that is 1/3 out into the frame away from the camera. It could be a clump of grass, a dead tree, a mud bank, anything will work. So focus on that point and you'll have sharp focus from right in front of the camera to infinity. Now, the best f-stops to use when you're determining your exposure and so you can maximize the amount of depth of field you have in your landscape are going to be in the range of f8 to f16. And depending on what lens you're using, what brand lens you're using, some of those apertures may be sharper than others, so a little bit of testing on your part may be necessary. Like with quite a bit of my landscape photography, I like to use the circular polarizer and graduated neutral density filters, which we've talked about several times already. But in this case, it really punches up the green in the marsh grass, intensifies the blue in the water, and adds a lot more intensity to the clouds in the blue sky. So, you know, using these tools, but a lot of people will have a tendency to overuse them, so be careful about that as well. Use them as tools, don't use them as a crutch. My settings for this scenario is 1/60th of a second shutter speed at f11 and an ISO of 100.
We really hit it on the mark. The clouds are perfect. We've got a gorgeous day. Chamber of Commerce day, we call it. Puffy white clouds and blue sky. I've been shooting an elevated position with the camera by using ladders on this strip because we don't really have any other way to get up. There's no trees out here and nothing, no other way to get up. So today, with this curve in the river, without the ladder, you can't really see the curve. You are looking flat over the grass and it becomes a sky picture, not a foreground picture. So by using the ladder and getting my feet up to 12 or 13 feet, I have brought the foreground into the shot and made it just equally as important as the beautiful puffy white clouds and blue sky. I am going to use this S-curve in the creek as a curvature in the foreground of the picture, which leads us back to the background and the puffy white clouds and just a gorgeous Lowcountry scenic. But you've got these clouds moving through really fast, so the composition in the top half of the frame is moving really very quickly. The bottom half is pretty steady, so you can kind of weigh which is more important by what's happening in the sky. So I might shoot a bunch with you know, 2/3 above the horizon line and then switch to a third. Put some in the center so you're balancing the elements, and you know, you may decide your preference at the computer. Composition, besides the lighting, is one of the most important things you got to think about, and it gets you thinking about the rest of the stuff that you have to make decisions on to get good photographs out here, and that is, you know, lens selection and lighting, whether it's going to be frontal lighting or 3/4 lighting on one side or the other. I'm going to shoot with a 10 to 22 on a 7D today, and we're I'm going to use the full range of that zoom because this scene is real close to me. You know, where I can really get a lot of detail in the foreground, but I can also, I've got a glorious sky, so I want to be able to get as much as I can and then maybe zoom in a little bit and get pieces of that.
Wow, what an amazing place, the Carolina coast. And I invite each and every one of you to come out and enjoy this magnificent place for yourself. I hope you've enjoyed this week's show and learned a little more about photographing the magnificent seascapes here. More information about this week's show or Eric Horan's work is available online. And remember, it's not just about the photograph, it's the outdoor experience. I'm your host, Doug Gardner. Thank you for joining me on another wild photo adventure. Are we ready?
Oh, it works. Am I in your picture?
All right, well, our sunset, this sunrise. Now, on the other side of that, if this was beautiful seascapes that this place has to offer, I invite each and every one of you to come out and enjoy this place for yourself. You know, I hope.
Hey guys, if you like what you're seeing, be sure to click below to subscribe and share.